Hey kids, today we're going to review plot and character. All stories have some elements in common. For example, all stories have characters, all stories have a setting, which is where something takes place. All stories have a problem or an issue that needs to be overcome, and a character that learns something in the end. Whether the story is true, it's a real informational story, like the story of a story from someone's life, or a fiction story like Diary of a Wimpy Kid or Cinderella. All of those stories will have those elements. First, we're going to look at characters. Characters are the people, animals, and creatures who are in a story. They don't have to be a human. It could be an animal that talks. It could be a made up creature. It could even be an object that actually comes to life in the story. You can think of a lot of crazy examples of this from some Disney movies where you have things that are not typically a character that become a character. Think of Dora the Explorer, for example. One of the characters is a backpack. That backpack sings and talks, therefore, it is a character. The main character, who can often be categorized as the good guy or the hero, is the protagonist. You're going to hear that word a lot going through the years in your reading classes. So you're going to want to remember the protagonist. That is the hero or the good guy. They don't have to be a superhero like Superman or Spider-Man. They're just the main character who is generally seen as good. Now, there's usually someone who is standing in their way. They might not be terrible or a villain like the Joker, but they are a bad guy. They don't have to be a bank robber or a murderer to be a bad guy. They're just someone who is a bad influence or is standing in the way of the main character, the protagonist, from achieving their goals. The main character will change through the events of the story, especially at the climax or the turning point of the story. So they will realize a lesson, which ends up being the theme of the text. The setting is where the story takes place. It also will include the when, the time, the season, and the year. Now, we include the when because if the story takes place in Temple, Texas, it makes a huge difference whether it is 1845 or 2020. Or what if it was in Temple, Texas in like year 3000? That would be way different than right now. It would be in the future, and that could be like a science fiction show. Or if it was in 1840s, it would be like the Wild West, and you would have like just people on horses and trains. So it's going to totally affect the story. We also pay attention to the time of day or the season, and that's going to affect the plot and the actions of the characters. So they might be stuck in a snowstorm. So it's important to note that it's winter. If it were summer, they would not have that problem. So here you can see our setting on the backdrop of our review page is a cozy little home at the foot of a towering mountain. And the family is gathering firewood for the impending winter. So we can tell that they are in the home. It's near a mountain. And it's fall, not winter yet. Now we need to pay attention to the word exposition. Exposition. That is the fancy name for the part of the story at the beginning when the characters and setting are introduced. Once upon a time in a land far, far away, in a castle on a hill, a princess sat peering out her window. Okay, so we have a character of the princess. We have a setting, a land far, far away, and a castle. Okay, so that part of the beginning of the story, when the characters and setting are introduced, is called the exposition. Next, we're going to look at plot. All stories have a plot. They could be a true story from your life, And the way you tell it is you're gonna introduce the problem and all of the things that happened, and then what happened in the end. Or it could be a made-up story. Any kind of fiction book we read, whether it's a chapter book or a picture book, is going to have a plot. You're going to start with the exposition, introducing your characters and setting, and then next comes your conflict. The conflict is the problem of the story. It could be a problem between two characters, a good guy and a bad guy, the new kid and the bully. This could be a fear or weakness in the main character. So, for example, in our Humpty Dumpty story, how he was afraid of heights, that's a character versus self. You're overcoming your own fears. Or it could be a natural disaster that the character encounters. So if someone lives in a town that was hit by a hurricane and they have to survive that disastrous hurricane and maybe save their dog, that would be a character versus nature. They're going to have to survive something, an event, a disaster that was caused by nature. So after we introduce our characters and setting in the exposition, next the conflict gets introduced. Now the conflict doesn't just stay put, because just like climbing a mountain, the conflict will get worse and worse. It gets harder and harder as you go up. As you go uphill, your legs get more and more tired. This is the rising action. All of the obstacles that come in the way, complicating the problem, making it harder and harder as you go. Events happen after the problem is introduced that cause the tension to build. The problem becomes worse and worse. Often these events foreshadow or give hints about what will happen at the climax. So as you're climbing up that mountain, you're going to pass the sign that says, danger, there's an avalanche, and you might see falling rocks to the side. Your friend will slip and fall, and you have to get them all bandaged up and pick them up, and the bear comes out of the forest and growls. Those are all problems that add to the issue. That's the rising action. And that comes after the conflict. It's adding events and complications to that problem. Now, finally, you get to the top of the mountain. That's the climax. It's often the most exciting point in the story, but in some stories, it's not exciting. It's just a turning point. It's when the character begins to change. And the solution to the conflict is right around the corner. You feel like things are going to start getting better. All of a sudden, there's all this craziness. In an action movie, it would be the big battle scene, okay? But it's when after that, you know, once you win, it's going to get better. The climax usually comes just past the middle of the story. We often refer to it as the middle of the story, but if you notice on our plot mountain, the way down goes faster. It's a shorter route because going downhill is so much easier. As things start to get better, if all of the things happened at the end of the story, the book would not be as interesting. So your rising action stretches out the longest in a chapter book, and then the climax happens, and it's quick going downhill into the end of the movie. Things are wrapped up and fixed quickly. Now, the falling action, you see our hiker skiing down the slope. So that means that this is going to happen fast. The main problem, as well as the minor problems, begin to be resolved. The bear has gone back in the woods to take care of its little cubs. The girl's leg, who was hurt in the avalanche, is healing. They're happily walking down the mountain. Things are getting better. You're about to reach the other side. So this is our plot diagram so far. We have our exposition, introduction of characters and setting. The conflict is introduced, the rising action, which builds your tension. Finally, you get to the climax, the craziest, most exciting part, and then things are starting to get better with the falling action. They're falling into place, as you would say. Finally, we have the resolution. You can see the word solution in the word resolution. This is the happy ending of the story. The problem has been solved. And at this point, you need to ask yourself, how has the character changed? Notice the lesson that they learned. That's going to be the theme of your story. So at the resolution, everyone is happy. Now, you're saying, what about a cliffhanger? Well, a cliffhanger leaves off the resolution. You're hanging on that cliff. Okay, you're not gonna reach a resolution, leading you to want to pick up the next episode or the next book in the series. So thank you guys for reviewing plot and character. I hope you have a better understanding of it now.